Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another video on this channel, which is my top 100 movies of all time. My personal top 100. Not to be confused with the top 100. My top 100. Today we're going to go over the top rated movies of the top 100 movies, which is kind of confusing to say, but basically that means I got them from iMDB, and I looked up what's the highest rated overall movies that are on that list. So starting off the list is number 67, and it is Pulp Fiction. As I told you, there would be a lot of Tarantino films on this list, and this is my second favorite Tarantino film. Where It Is reflects that, obviously. And I love everything about this movie. Travolta and Sam Jackson's relationship in it is just incredible to watch on screen. The three different stories kind of being told separately that all kind of converge at the end into one is just awesome. This isn't the movie that made everyone love Tarantino, but it's definitely the one that cemented him as a phenomenal storyteller. The ability to keep the suspense in movies where they're just talking and you're like, oh my God, someone could die at any fucking moment is... It's hard to do. A lot of movies struggle a lot. Tarantino doesn't seem to struggle at all when it comes to movies like that. There's a ton of just super memorable moments from this movie. I think it's a lot of the newer ones get a little bit more credibility. I recently asked what people's favorite Tarantino films are, and I feel like a lot of the responses were newer ones, but also this one doesn't get slept on either. That doesn't even fucking really make sense to myself when I say it. I found it super interesting that Uma Thurman almost was passed over for this role. Obviously, later she went on to star in the Kill Bill franchise, so obviously Tarantino, fell in love with her in that aspect of her acting. But yeah, this one's just great. This one has an 8.9 on iMDb, and I usually don't listen to those things. Like, I don't usually care about what other outlets have rated something, especially when it comes to something as broken as iMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. But because it does kind of reflect kind of the zeitgeist of these films, so that's why I wanted to make this video to reflect those. So it's the first one kicking it off. This next movie might be definitely on people's short lists for probably one of the greatest movies of all time, and that is The Godfather. It's at number 31 on my list. This movie made a lot of people household names. Francis Ford Coppola, Al Pacino, James Caan, Robert Duvall, Diane Keaton. All of those people were no-name actors when this movie was made. And so there was a novel of the same name, The Godfather, written 3 years prior to this, which is pretty incredible that it got adapted that fast. Because I seem to think sometimes that, Hollywood quickly adapts things, but I guess it's kind of always been that way. It feels like it's, someone writes a book and then 6 months later it's a movie. And that's kind of just been the way it's gone forever now. So this movie made the foundations for how mafia movies would be made forever after this one. It was so close to how the actual mafia runs that a production car was shot at by the mafia. Well, allegedly shot at by the mafia. It was really interesting because they sat down and had a meeting about it, and they took the word mafia out. So the word mafia isn't in the script. It's not in. They never say it in this movie or any of the Godfather movies. It's quality when the real world is affected by the way a movie's made. So The Godfather is one of 3 movies, and you could make an argument that part 2 is the better movie, but I personally am a sucker for the OGs, and I've probably only seen the second Godfather twice, and that one just doesn't resonate as much with me as this first one does. Just so many of the iconic scenes, the horse head, the beginning, the opening of the movie, You'll Make an Offer You Can't Refuse, the cat, which was actually a stray cat that they just found wandering around on set, that Marlon Brando just picked up and started holding and petting, and that just became such a trope. He actually also had implants put in his mouth to make him, he wanted to give the character Vito Corleone like a bulldog appearance, like he wanted to really make him this like rough, intimidating presence. So there, you can actually Google. There's the molds that he wore in his jaw to give him that like face, and it's number 26 on my list, coming in on an 8.8 on IMDb, is Fight Club. The anti-corporate, you're not special, mixed up with quotable lines and a twist that makes you almost have to watch the movie twice to appreciate it. Now you look back and you know, obviously spoiler alerts, that Tyler Durden's in his, his split personality the whole time. But it's interesting to go back and watching it, knowing that, like in most movies where there's a big twist of something that was the whole entire time, it's really fun to like subtly see and like think, what, how did we not notice that? Brad Pitt and Edward Norton together in this are awesome, like they are in everything that they're in. It's one of those movies that I watched as a kid and I loved for the action and the twists, like I said, and just some of the set pieces and the fighting. And then I watched it as an adult and I really appreciate the acting and the subtle humor. Like there's a lot of funny lines in it, and just like the story and how it's a cult classic now. David Fincher movies appear a few times on my list out of just 100, and I know that if I expanded this list to 250, more of his stuff would appear on there. He also does a lot of TV shows, a lot of episodes of TV shows that I really, really like it as well. That semi-depressing yet intriguing style that he has is why I love his movies, and I love this one. Also, Fight Club, coming out in 1999, is another nod to the fact that 1999 might be the best year of movies ever. Speaking of depressing yet intriguing, number 22 on my list. So we got a bunch of top 25s on here. Number 22 is Schindler's List. This has a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, so which basically means that everyone that's seen it likes it, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a critic that didn't like it. Before Liam Neeson went on to make Taken and the 13 retreads and sequels of that movie, he starred in this, which is based on a true story. When I think of Spielberg movies, I actually sometimes forget that this is one because it's so dark and depressing. It's shot in all black and white. There's very subtle hints of color to mark something of significance in the film, which is just makes it incredible. It's a movie that I'd love to go back to and watch more often if it wasn't about the Holocaust, and also that it's 3 hours long. It is worth going back to and watching because it is an incredibly powerful story that, although you kind of feel like crap watching it, afterwards you'll feel a little bit better. And that leaves us to the last movie of this video, is number 13 on my list, and that is The Dark Knight. I don't even know where to start with this one. I struggle to find a better comic book movie. And Batman is probably one of the best comic book villains. I mean, it's comic book villains. His story is unique somewhat. It's darker than most superheroes. He's not, he doesn't have any power other than he's rich. I don't need to explain Batman to you. Christopher Nolan's take on this kind of changed the way that comic book movies were made for a long time, or at least for DC. Comic book movies were looked at as super fun and lighthearted, uplifting, and like shot in bright colors. And then this one toned it way the F down, and it kind of changed the way things have been made. I actually can't help but to think of how much the DC universe, movie-wise, was hurt probably because of it. Like, it's a better thing that we got this, but because they tried to emulate the way that this movie was made, it's almost like they've kind of broke themselves. Obviously, the highlight of this one being the Joker and Heath Ledger bringing this character to another stratosphere. He was an amazing actor. Rest in peace to him, obviously. The other thing I really respect about these movies is that the three of them, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises, they're made in such a way where you could watch them separately from themselves. His like origin the middle, and then the end of the story, there's really all three of them you could watch separately, and they still would hold up and they still would make sense. And that's just a nod to how well these movies are made. This one in particular. And The Dark Knight Rises isn't looked at quite as fondly as The Dark Knight is, but it's still a great movie. And it's a shame that Heath Ledger passed before they could kind of flush out and whatever kind of story they were going with for the ending. You can tell that they gave it to Bane. So I was stumped for a bit on where to put this one over another comic book movie. Ultimately, this one edged it out. Considering it's 13, there's only one other one I could put above it. But that'll be in another video. Speaking of comic book movies, I didn't want to throw too many of them on the list. Marvel has a million of them. So I was like, all right, let me craft this in a way that I put one that kind of represents it. So I'm going to make a whole series dedicated to movies that are part of a series that I didn't include. But that'll be coming up in a later episode. For now, I had to cut it here. I did leave out a ton of other movies too, and that'll be on an honorable mention. So that will be the next video. Part 7 is the honorable mentions and just some more of the list. Thank you guys for watching these videos. You can comment down below. What do you think of some of these if you haven't seen all of these? Because I feel like most of these movies have been seen by mostly everybody. I'd probably say maybe there's one or two that you haven't seen, but if you're my age, you've probably seen all of them. So thank you guys. If you could like the video, that'd be awesome. If you made it to the end here, and I will see you in the next video. Like the page and the YouTube video. Let's just cut it there.